Director of Outreach and Communications for the Assabet Village Co-op Market. I'm here with Board Director and fellow co-op owner, Rob Olney. He's heading up the site search now, or revamped site search. And for those of you who don't know, we are opening a full-service grocery store that in many ways is like any other grocery store you've been to, every department you would expect. The big difference is, of course, is that we will be sourcing from dozens and dozens of local food producers to keep profits local, build a thriving local economy. And the other big difference is that we are owned by thousands of local residents rather than some far-off corporation, which gives us control over our food system and our communities. So the target location is Maynard, and with almost 1,200 member owners on board now and our site search in high gear now, things are getting pretty exciting around here. And our site search has been underway for a couple of years now. Many of you know that. We're looking for a 7,000 to 10,000 square foot space in a tight real estate market, and it's challenging. Which is why we are psyched to welcome Rob to the board. Rob is a real estate investor from Acton. He joined the co-op board in January, and he's already revamped the search with 11 potential sites in the works. He may give you even more updated numbers on that in a minute here. So today Rob's going to talk a bit about his background, the approach that he's taking to our site search, and field some of your most pressing questions. So without further ado, let's get to it. Rob, welcome to the board. Thank you so much for serving. As we've been telling our owners, it seems like the right guy at exactly the right time. But maybe we can start by asking what your background is with regard to the co-op and real estate investing.
Yeah, sure. So I joined the co-op maybe 4 years ago. My member number is somewhere in the 300s. And I actually met it at a event where a number of board members were at. And I really liked what everyone was talking about. I particularly am passionate about the reduced carbon footprint, so that's my passion, why I'm really excited about the food co-op.
Awesome. And of course, we're psyched to have you generally as a board member, especially a former business owner in the community. But you have quite a bit of real estate investing experience as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that as kind of the background for why you decided to step up and take the helm of our site search?
Yeah, thank you. So when I bought my business now about 13 years ago, I negotiated a lease for a 10,000 square foot building, similar to the one we're looking for now. More industrial type of building, but had all the same electrical, water requirements, had flow requirements, had traffic requirements. And then that had an automatic lease escalation built into it. And my business was growing, so about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I conducted a search for my own business for a 20,000 square foot building. And I ended up finding a couple locations that were good, and we lost the deal. And then I found a great location. It was only 43,000 square foot, so a little bit bigger, but I was able to negotiate a great deal to purchase it. And actually my cost per square foot was less than what I was paying cost per square foot with my 10,000 square foot building. And I ran that. We had a $300,000 renovation on that building. And then a couple years later, we had a water main break, and I had another $200,000 not really renovation, upgrade with that. So we sourced that, negotiated that, managed that project. And then about a year and a half ago, I sold the building. I sold it for double what I bought it for. And then I reinvested that into a 10,000 square foot storage building. Again, 10,000 square feet, right what we're looking for. I also bought 2 apartment buildings, and I have 2 houses, family homes that I rent out as well. So I have some experience in not only the site search, but also leasing and closing deals and being the landlord and setting up leases. So I think I can bring that to bear, and we've started making some good progress there.
Can you tell me a little bit about that process, and then overall about what kind of approach you take to locating commercial real estate?
Sure, glad to. So the first thing is what we all don't really know is that the board really has been working very hard to look at sites. And so there were probably between 40 and 50 sites that the board had looked at over the past several years. And so we really did take 10, 12 hours of interviewing back and forth to understand all the things we looked at, all the deals that started but failed, why they failed, what were the lessons learned, what market studies were updated, what it supported then versus what it supports now. So it was very educational. And so I created a small little database of those existing sites and captured what happened with those sites. And then I conducted a very thorough process. I can do it with the same tools that our members have. I went on Google Maps, and you can plot out either a 10,000 square foot building or about a half-acre space and look what's available in Maynard. And you can quickly see that there's not many locations available for that big of a site. But all of the ones that I identified that were not already looked at went on the list. I also looked at neighboring towns, same thing, both Acton, Stowe, Hudson, and a little bit of Concord, West Concord, up Powder Mill. It's the same thing to see what would fit and how it would fit. That went on the list. Then I also looked at the Maynard town property records, and they record it in square footage for the actual lot size. So I looked at all of those lots to see if I missed anything. And there were a few that I did not locate that got added to the list. And then the subsequent thing I did is I looked in a couple databases for businesses in the area that occupy about 10,000 square foot to see if the businesses were selling or eager to sell. And there were 4 or 5 also that I investigated, and those went on the list as well. The other thing that we may not know is that the board engaged with a real estate broker to locate additional locations. And so I've engaged with him as well, and we've gone through not only the things on our list, but a couple things that he knows about that might be coming available in the near future. So we're aware of not only the past, but the present, and also a little bit of the future.
You talked about some of the sort of creative approaches you were taking. You just mentioned a couple of them, looking at businesses in the area that might not be for sale, but that occupy a space that might be close to what we're looking for, and knocking on doors. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that. I know at the meeting you talked about the importance of not putting your eggs in one basket, but in fact going to multiple offers at once. Literally knocking on doors at properties that aren't for sale. I think you also mentioned looking at smaller properties that might not be ideal, but when paired with an adjacent property, could certainly work, and then knocking on the door of the adjacent property owner.
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple different scenarios. The one that's most common is there are a number of shopping centers in our area, and they may have an open slot for 5,000 square foot and in Unit M, and in Unit Z or Unit A, they also have 2,500 slot. And so one of the opportunities is to work with the landlord to see if we can incent someone who is adjacent to one of those open slots to relocate to another, to the other open, so that it would have a contiguous 7,500 square feet, or is what we're trying to do. One of the conflicts that we're running into with that particular scenario is that many of the shopping centers have an anchor tenant, which is a grocery store. And in those scenarios, there is provisions where they will not allow a second grocery store to occupy space in the same shopping center. Mm-hmm. So that's typically the situation in all the shopping centers we've looked at so far. There are a few shopping complexes that do not have a grocery store as an anchor tenant, so we're more aggressively pursuing those targets. Another thing that we're doing is typically, if we were conducting a search, we would look for commercially zoned locations only. But because we have so many members that are from our local towns, we're going after residential zoned properties on the assumption that if we find a place and everything else works, we can count on our members to go to the zoning planning meeting and ask for the property to be rezoned to commercial. So that's opened up some possibilities, primarily around churches, but in other places as well. And then the last thing I want to talk about that combines not only being creative, but also the residential zoning. From time to time, there are small homes along main busy thoroughfares in our community that might be available to be purchased, one next to the other. Now, one small property won't do it for us, but there may be adjacent homes that we can make offers on to get enough property and then count on our members to help us with the rezoning. And so that's another option that we're trying to work on creatively to get a deal done.
We've been talking about properties, we've been talking about this revamped search, the 50 or so properties that had been looked at before you came on board and took over the site search. Can you give us updated numbers on, in terms of how many sites right now are potentially viable for our store, and of those, how many are in Maynard?
Yeah, so out of the current viable candidates, we're actually now up to 13 since I talked at Henry's Tomb. We have 13 viable targets, and all but one of them is located in Maynard.
Fantastic.
One is very close to Maynard, but on the other side of the border.
Okay, awesome. And obviously that's very exciting. I know for those of you who don't know, when the one site that we had been in negotiations on last summer fell through, basically got put on the way back burner, we were down to really just a handful or fewer of potentially viable sites, So the fact that Rob has revamped this thing where we're up to 13 viable sites and all but one of those in Maynard is very exciting. Can you remind us a little bit of what we're looking for? What are these site search criteria that you have when you're making these inquiries?
Yeah, first and foremost, we're looking for a store footprint to be between 7,500 and 10,000 square feet. And a lot of people don't have a real sense of what that is. And the closest thing that I can pick out for our members to know is if they've ever traveled to Acton and gone to the Trader Joe's before it expanded. That space was around 10,000 square feet.
Right.
Early on, when I first joined as a member, I actually counted the floor tiles to see what size it was. So that's a good size for people to know. If they're in West Concord and they go to the Gold's Gym, that's a 10,000 square foot building. So it's a big footprint, bigger than most people are used to. People often ask about the mill buildings, and specifically building number 10, and that's only 4,300 square feet. So it's a kind of a shocker to people to figure that out. So that's the first and foremost. The second big thing is half our members are from Maynard, but the other half are not. So they're all going to be driving, and even the folks from Maynard, half, 2/3 are going to be driving. So we need to make sure we have sufficient parking. Our market projections are saying something like 2,000 visitors a week, which means we need to have 45 parking spaces just for our customers, and probably another 15 for our employees. So 60 spaces plus 10,000 square foot is somewhere in 3/4 of an acre range for a property size.
Okay.
And so that becomes a big target to find space for. One of the things why we're looking at so many different targets is the market study and how the projections on how many people will visit our store varies by 100 feet in where you locate the store, or whether we're on a main thoroughfare or just off a main thoroughfare. So nothing's going to be perfect, but we need to have enough options that we can have the lowest cost to occupy a space and the maximum amount of visitors to maximize revenue.
Right. Yeah, and you know, it's funny, we've come up against this parking issue. You know, it's one of the biggest challenges, of course, in finding a site that's viable. And we've had our owners, and it's, you know, it's obviously deeply appreciated, tell us, you know, just forget about parking. We will walk. We will walk and we will support you, which is awesome. And we know some people will ride their bike and walk and support us, even if we're not walkable. But the reality, of course, is that a mom or dad with a couple kids in tow in the middle of winter is not going to walk. And a community-owned grocery store, any grocery store, does not survive by what folks can carry out in two hands. We need folks to do their weekly shop there in order for us to survive and thrive and be around for a long time. So, you know, adequate, adjacent, dedicated, exclusively dedicated parking is a must. So, huge challenge, of course.
And even in the 2 months that I've been a board member, I've interviewed board members from 5, 7 different co-ops already, and they all talk about the necessity of having good parking. Whether you're at Monadnock, whether you're at Brattleboro, whether you're at Greenfields Market, Portland, Maine, all of them need to have the parking because they need the customers.
Yeah, and Monadnock and Greenfield co-ops, Monadnock in Keene, New Hampshire, Greenfield out in Greenfield, Massachusetts, of course, are actually great comps to look at, comparatives, because they, at least in their original footprints, are the same size as what we're looking to do. So the amount of parking they have, their experience with parking is directly relevant to what we're trying to do. Maybe you can just remind us, you know, we've kind of been making a concerted effort to be as transparent as possible with this newly revamped site search, releasing the number of sites we're working on, even starting to release some of the eliminated site data so that folks can understand why some sites don't work. Can you tell me, you know, on many of these sites, it can actually be risky to release details, and we've learned, of course, best practices from fantastic co-ops, and we've learned some not so good practices from co-ops that have kind of shot themselves in the foot. Can you tell us a little bit in terms of commercial real estate, negotiations and all the rest, why it can be actually risky to release details of a site before we've got it in hand and have signed on it?
Certainly, yeah. So our job as the board of directors is to find the best site for our members at the lowest cost, because ultimately we'll be loaning money to help with the construction costs and getting the store set up and all that. So the big deal here is at the lowest cost. Here in Maynard, we have 3 really good investors who know what they're doing, and we're competing against them. So there are cases already that 2 years ago a building was bought for $600,000, and only a few months later was bought again for $800,000. That's caused an inflation in pricing around Maynard. So the less people know about what's going on specifically, the better I'm able to negotiate the lowest possible deal for our members.
So we know now that we have 13 viable sites you're working on, 12 in Maynard. We've added a couple even just since last weekend, a few days ago, which is really exciting. I didn't know that until now. Can you give us an example of an eliminated site, a recently eliminated site, and why we eliminated it?
Yeah, sure. In general, so we need about 3/4 of an acre. So we had some sites here in Maynard that were ½ acre. And we tried working the numbers and it just did not work. And we abandoned them. They became non-viable. There was a house for sale next to the golf course. And we thought maybe we could clear that and have it rezoned, and it was just too small. There is a large shopping center location called the Kmart location, which everyone knows about.
Right.
And that's going to take a number of years. It's going to get bought by a developer. Rates for leases in that area are around $30 per square foot, which is double what we can afford. We were looking at a piece of property that was across the street from the Kmart location, and again, cleared, only ½ acre, and we started approaching the seller of that, and he did not want to work with the co-op. Too long, too messy. He decided to develop the property himself. So these are the kinds of situations that come up, and we evaluate them for fit for us And sometimes we're being evaluated by the seller and they decide to move on to something else.
So I'm going to ask you a question that that someone asked a couple days ago at our event at Amory's Tomb, where folks were asking you questions about the site search. It's a question that has been asked since long before I joined several years ago, and it's a question that's been on the mind of even the original organizers. And that is, when, in your best estimate as a soothsayer and as the man in charge of the site search, will we find our store and open?
And I'll answer the same thing I answered a few days ago, which is I'm committed to having the store open this year or die trying. I think we have enough opportunities and we have enough members willing to support us. I think it's easily achievable.
That's awesome and fantastic, and just as exciting to hear now as it was a few days ago. Great. Thank you, Rob, for sitting down and for getting in all the nitty-gritty details. We're psyched to see what you come up with. We know that as soon as we have a site in our hand and we sign, things start moving very fast. We are already looking to spin up a grant writing committee. We've got more than 30 people on board for the capital campaign committee. We will very soon need folks to step up and join our hiring committee, of course, to hire our general manager, to hire our capital campaign coordinator. So it's an exciting time. We want to be ready as soon as you sign on the line. As soon as we sign on the line, we find that site that works out in terms of sales forecasts and all the rest. And so to do that, we want our owners to come on board and get as excited as we are. And of course, board capacity. We still need a couple of board members to join to make sure that when this roller coaster gets pushed over the hump, that we've got the people power on the board to make sure that this thing is done and done right, and that we do achieve what Rob is going to die trying to do, open the store in 2020. So if you have not yet joined the co-op, we have now 1,196 member owners. 1,200 is the bare minimum we need to launch a capital campaign, although we expect once we announce our location, hopefully soon, that a number of people will come off the sidelines and join. But we need you to help us get to 1,200 and beyond, so go to assabetvillage.coop, click on Become an Owner, and become an owner today in the co-op. It's a one-time $200 share. There's no annual fee. It's payable in $25 installments. And of course, you get great owner benefits for it. Those are all listed on the website. And you get the pride of knowing that you own a community-owned grocery store that supports local farms and producers, that builds a thriving local economy, that pays living wages, reduces our food's carbon footprint, and gets us back to building community, which is sorely needed. If you want to volunteer for one of those committees, or for tabling behind this table at some of the awesome food festivals and farmers markets around the region, please email me, Lorne, that's Lorne, at assabetvillage.coop, and we will get you started volunteering. It's a lot of fun. We have 70 volunteers already on board, and we'd love to have you as well. So join the co-op, stay tuned, and Rob and I and the rest of the board will be offering updates as they come, and they're coming fast. So do stay tuned. Find us on Facebook, find us online at assabetvillage.coop, and have a great week, everyone. Thanks very much, Rob.
Well,